Number 1. Symbols. My younger brother told me that there was a witch who lived in the woods behind our house. My brother was 8 years old at the time. 8-year-olds definitely are more likely to believe in such things. I was 14 though. I didn't believe in witches. I figured either he was just scared of the dark outside his bedroom window, or he had seen something, mistaken it for a witch, and let his imagination go crazy. He, however, always insisted that there was a witch. I'm an indoor boy. I have no problem with that now, and I had no problem with that when I was a teenager. So I never had a reason to go back in those woods. Once, when I was babysitting my little brother, I did a pretty bad thing. I invited my best friend Terry over and we were playing video games. I completely took my attention off of my little brother. Early in the evening, I heard some noises out in the backyard. Terry and I went to the door and it was my little brother. He was crying and saying that he had been out in the backyard playing. He claimed that the witch had come out of the woods, and she tried to talk him into coming into the woods to play with her. My brother, his name was Patrick, refused. He said he knew better than to go with strangers. He then claimed that the witch then got angry at him and began coming towards him. That's when Patrick ran up to the door, and the witch disappeared. Yes, I felt like a jerk. I should have been paying more attention. But I did try explaining to Patrick that there was no such thing as a witch. He probably just saw a stranger, and he thought that it was a witch. He seemed more upset, though, that I didn't believe him than he seemed about the witch. Right then, my best friend Terry challenged me to go into the woods if I was so confident that witches didn't exist. I tried to decline, of course. He began calling me chicken, and now suddenly brave Patrick joined in, mocking me. So I said I would, because there was nothing to be scared of. So Patrick and Terry followed me to the forest. The dare was that I walk at least about 50 yards into the forest before I came back. I had no idea how to measure that, but figured I could guesstimate. So I slowly walked into the dark forest. I tried to keep up a brave front, but it was just bravado. I actually was scared. It was pretty dim outside, and I did not have a flashlight. It would have been easy for the light to play tricks with my eyes. I'm not sure how deep I had gotten into the woods when I saw something that scared the crap out of me. There was a small clearing in the woods ahead of me. There was nobody there, but there were about 5 or 6 old dolls laying there. Some of them were dismembered, with their body parts strewn around the clearing. There were also symbols carved into the trees. I can't really describe the symbols because I wasn't sure what they were. I can't say they were witchcraft symbols, and I wasn't scared that there was a witch in the woods. But the fact that there was indeed someone in the woods who was obviously acting weird meant it was pretty likely that my brother had actually been enticed into the woods by someone, witch or not. I was pretty freaked out by this, but I definitely wasn't going to tell my little brother about it. It would just scare him too much. I did grab one of the dolls, however, to show my best friend. I hid it under the back of my shirt. When I came back out, I insisted that there was no one in the woods, and there was nothing to be scared of. Patrick was actually really relieved. Later in my bedroom, I showed my best friend the doll. He really thought it was pretty awesome. Afterwards, I took it and threw it in the garbage can on the back porch. That night, I was doing some homework when I heard a noise. It sounded like a raccoon had gotten into the trash can. Annoyed, I walked over to the back porch door and turned on the lights. I gasped as I saw a really large woman. I mean, she was over 6 feet tall, standing naked on the back porch. Standing naked on the back porch. The lid to the trash can was off, and in her hands, she was cradling the doll that I had thrown in the garbage. The light caught her by surprise. She looked at me, and I saw the craziest eyes I'd ever seen, looking at me through her matted hair. But before I could react further, the woman took off and ran into the woods. I had to call the police about what happened. I didn't care that she went through the garbage to get her doll, but now I believed what Patrick had been telling me. And if the woman was trying to entice him into the woods, then she would probably do it again. The police found her in the woods and they took her away. I hope to a psychiatric ward or something. I don't know much more about it. But I'll never get that picture of her out of my head.
Bird watching. An activity that I usually enjoyed in the fall and would regularly go hiking in the local forest to go bird watching. It was never pleasant to go for hikes in the summer. Too much sweat and too many bugs always made it a miserable experience. But the fall was just perfect. The scariest thing that have ever happened to me occurred when I was on one of these walks. I had gotten an early start and wanted to see how deep I could get into the hills. Now, it wasn't unusual to run into people during these hikes. Although the hills around us were rather deep with forest, fall was a very popular time to go hiking. But this day, I was out in the woods for several hours without seeing anyone. I was looking through my binoculars at a cardinal when I heard a twig snap not too far behind me. I jumped and spun around. I expected to at best see a small animal behind me and at worst see someone spying on me. But I didn't see anything. I didn't think too much about it because it really could have been anything. Either the snapping sound or the noise I made spinning around must have scared the cardinal away. So I decided to continue hiking and looking for some other birds to watch. As I was walking around, I could have sworn that I heard someone else walking. It was almost like being in a living cartoon. As I was walking, it seemed like I heard an extra set of footsteps. But every time I stopped walking, I didn't hear anything. I was stuck between thinking I was imagining it and thinking that someone else in the woods was really trying to mess with my mind. This continued for quite a while. Fortunately, I was pretty familiar with the area, so I wasn't more than just a little nervous. Hearing what I assumed were other footsteps did wreck my nerves a little bit though. By the time I got to this creek that I usually stop by for a drink of water, I was definitely a bit on edge. I walked into the creek, much happier to be hearing the sounds of the flowing water than the leaves. As I was about to bend down to get a drink of water, I noticed a bird off on the far side of the creek. But while it was the bird that got my attention, it was what was beside the bird that kept it. A human body was laying down on the far side of the creek. His head was turned to the side, and he was thickly dressed, so I couldn't tell if he was breathing. I tried calling out to the guy to see if he was alive or conscious. He didn't answer. If he was alive and I didn't try to help him out a little bit, I would have felt much worse. So I made my way walking down to a log that was crossing the creek and carefully made it to the other side. I cautiously approached the man laying in the creek. As I got closer to him, I didn't have to get too close to realize that he was dead. The blood on the rocks and his discolored flesh was more than enough to let me know he was dead. And the blood made me pretty confident that he had been killed. Panicked, I quickly got back to the log and crossed back over. I guess I was nervous and missed my footing. I slipped and fell into the water. Fortunately, it was a shallow creek and I only needed the log so I wouldn't get wet. I was soaked now. I got up and trudged out of the water. I began making my way back out of the hills. At first I felt panicked and that gave way to worry. I kept remembering the sounds of the footsteps as I made my way out of the woods. I began hearing them again, and when I sped up, hurrying to get out, I could have sworn I heard them keeping pace with me. I was convinced that someone was following me the entire time, but the worst part about it was that I wasn't sure if this was really happening or it was all in my head. Regardless, I made it out of the forest without anyone doing anything to me. I had to report the body to the park rangers. I let them know about me supposedly being followed, but I didn't really have any evidence other than my own paranoia to back that up. So yeah, I have no idea if someone was really after me or it was all in my head. Either way, it was terrifying.
Number 3. My bully. I know a lot of kids have been bullied growing up. Plenty of the people that I have known have been bullied. Now that I am an adult, I have friends who tell me that when they look back, they do not see their experiences being bullied as nearly as bad as it was when they were younger. The only sense that I can make of that is they must not have been bullied nearly as badly as I was. There is no way that I can look back on my childhood bully and not think that he was absolutely awful. My parents tended to move a whole lot. Many of the moves were pretty dramatic as well. In most of the places I have lived, I had no trouble making friends. Right before I turned 13, however, my parents moved to a town in rural Tennessee, which was just much worse. Right away, I began getting tormented by a bully named Gaylord. I guess the only way I can look on him with any sympathy is that his parents named him Gaylord. I guess it was after a baseball pitcher, so he claimed. And I have nothing against gay people, it's just the name seems to be a rather odd name for a parent to name their child. I couldn't imagine, though, that too many people gave him a hard time for his name, because he was a huge, angry, and downright scary kid. During my first week in the school, he already started picking on me. He began calling me names, most of which I do not care to repeat. I wasn't used to being bullied, so I wasn't sure how to respond to him. So one day, when he was antagonizing me, I broke down and said, "Well, at least my parents didn't name me Gaylord." Big mistake. The jackass jumped over his desk and began beating the living hell out of me. Fortunately for me, we were in math class, and the math teacher was also the wrestling coach, a huge man in his own right, and he pulled Gaylord off of me. The bully got suspended from school for a month. It was no shock to me that he had been suspended several times before, so this punishment was pretty severe. I was more scared after the fight than I had been before it. I thought that he'd be so much more difficult to deal with after the punishment than before it. So, I began dreading the end of the upcoming month. About a week after he had gotten suspended, I went out hiking in the nearby park, which was basically a small forest off to the side of the town. I was still very new to the area and hadn't made many friends. I think my altercation with the big bully probably didn't help me much. Who would want to be friends with someone who was likely to be the target of a huge and angry bully? I was walking along, a bit lost in my thoughts. I was able to get my situation off of my mind for the first time in a while. I couldn't claim I was really enjoying myself, though. I heard some noises up ahead of me, and it sounded like some other kids were playing. I thought it would be nice to try and meet some new people, and maybe make some friends, so I began walking towards the direction of the commotion. When I finally caught sight of the person who was making the noise, I froze in fear, 'cause I recognized it as Gaylord. I had only seen him from the back, though. He hadn't seen me. I realized that if I tried my best to be quiet, I could probably turn around and get away before he knew I was there. The biggest tough luck moment of my life came at that moment, though. As if he had a sixth sense, Gaylord slowly turned around, and his gaze met mine. And the sickest, most psychotic look that I'd ever seen on another human being's face flashed across his features. Terrified, I didn't wait for him to do anything. I turned and began running. I knew that he had to be chasing me, but I tried not to think about it. I just ran. I tried not to think about what he would do to me if he caught me. I just knew that it would be awful. And then, in mid-step, I felt something hit me. I immediately knew that it was Gaylord. I yelped and fell hard on the ground. I severely bit my tongue. I would find out later that my tongue nearly got severed. I felt my mouth fill up with blood. Gaylord took me, threw me on my back, and more blood began pouring out of my mouth. He began severely beating me. I put my hands up, but I could barely protect myself from this psychopath. He just pounded me over and over. My head got so fuzzy, and I just knew for a moment that I was gonna die. And everything went black. When I woke up, I was still laying in the forest, but it was dark and nobody was there. Every part of me hurt. My tongue felt like it was the size of a football. Although I was in severe agony, I was able to pull myself up to my feet. I began trudging through the forest. It hurt, but it wasn't nearly as scary as walking around was. I kept expecting Gaylord to jump out at me at every turn. I remember hearing an owl hoot, and I actually screamed a little, which of course hurt my tongue. I didn't think I would make it through the forest, but after a lot of plowing on, I finally made it out. I went up to the first house I came to and knocked on the door. As the door opened, I freaked out because I completely expected to see Gaylord standing behind the door. I started crying. But it wasn't Gaylord. It was an elderly woman who was shocked to see me there. I must have been a sight. I tried to tell her that I needed an ambulance, but I couldn't talk. I didn't need to, though. It was obvious. She called 911. At the hospital, I learned my tongue had nearly been severed off. It was being held on by a thread. I had a broken cheekbone, a fractured skull, a concussion, a broken arm, and 3 broken ribs. I informed them, through writing, who it was that had attacked me. Gaylord was arrested. He spent the next 5 years of his life in juvenile hall. Well, at least he was sentenced to it. My parents moved out of the town long before the 5 years were up. I don't look back on my bullying experience as something that wasn't as bad as I remembered it. It was as bad as I remembered. And for years I was terrified to be in the dark. I was terrified to go out in the woods. I was terrified to go to school. I was terrified to be alone. Gaylord took a lot from me, and I wish him nothing but the worst out of life. Hey all, Killer Orange Cat here. If you like this video, please let me know by hitting the like button. If you're not already subscribed to Killer Orange Cat, hit the button next to the tabby to be informed of new content. Please leave some comments below, and share this video with someone who might enjoy it. Always feel free to follow Ichigo and myself on Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to thank BumpInTheNight for this collaboration. Please make sure to visit his channel and subscribe. There will be a video collaboration on his channel as well, so make sure to listen to it. I want to thank everyone who has submitted stories for the Halloween special, and for other videos. I am a little backlogged in emails, but I will respond to everybody eventually. If you have a story that you'd like narrated on Killer Orange Cat, please email it to the address included in the description. In the meantime, make sure to check in your closet and check under your bed, because you never know where a Killer Orange Cat might be hiding. Good night.